G'day and welcome to another episode of Cuppa with the Jesuit. I'm Father Robin Koning, the Provincial Assistant for Vocations for the Australian Jesuit Province.
And I'm Julian Butler, a Jesuit scholastic, and Father Robin and I are joined today from Sydney by another Jesuit scholastic, Isaac DeMace. Isaac, welcome.
Thanks, Julian. Thanks, Father Robin. Good to be with you.
Isaac, you're in Sydney working with the Cardinaire Project, working with young people. Can you tell us a bit about the Cardinaire Project and what your role there is?
Sure. My role as chaplain is a very varied role. It goes from assisting the rector, Father Ramesh, with Bellarmine House, an intentional residential community for tertiary students at various institutions, to providing some retreats and some school workshops and programs like our Chats for Change, which cover a broad range of faith and justice and life issues. And then being with staff and just being around the place, being a Jesuit presence. So it's a very varied role, as I said. It's a fantastic role, very life-giving, lots of conversations, not too many cuppas, but it's very good nonetheless, very enjoyable, very life-giving.
So just to tell us a bit more about what is it that's life-giving in that role and being around those young people today?
I think for me, it's life-giving, firstly, from the conversation, and it's about that mutuality in conversation. So I mightn't be at my best that day and certainly get lifted up by those around me. Or it might be that others around me are having a bad day with an essay, or they mightn't have gone as well as they thought they had in an assessment. So it's about helping them, or another part of their life in general. So it's about accompaniment, that mutuality and journeying together in the house, in the project, and providing that aspect too, I suppose, in many ways, in the different programs that we have. So accompanying students in our school workshops, providing them with food for thought, activities to engage with that, and also in our Chats for Change program and retreats, going into issues that are important for young adults today in engaging with our world and trying to find their place within it.
Isaac, I suppose you were not too much older than some of the people you're dealing with there when you started considering religious life and the Jesuits. I'd like to share a bit about your vocation journey and the different aspects of that journey.
Sure. Well, I had a great childhood, very blessed family life. We were mass-going Catholics on a Sunday, and I was an altar server, which was a great role and responsibility, I suppose, for me. And in that, I saw the way in which so many people in the parish lived out their Christian vocation, lived out the gospel calling. So whether it was the freezer in the sacristy for meals that people who were in need could get a meal from that freezer, through to the bereavement team, the sacramental team, the Vinnies people that would come if people knocked on the door of the parish house. All of those different examples that I saw at school and as an altar server really sort of got me thinking about, what is this Christian life about? How do I live it? At school, I was involved in all sorts of different things, from cricket teams to theatre to debating, played the piano, was involved in tap dancing. So all these sorts of things. It's a very varied life I had, I suppose, in some ways. But there was a rich tapestry of joy and love of living in that. And I suppose I saw the benefits of a rich life, of a full life, of an engaged life. And so that led me to doing an arts degree, majoring in history at ACU, and going on to do a teaching degree at ACU too. And I suppose that richness, living at residential colleges, that notion of service, the example of family and the parish back home in Shepparton, led me to that call of a vocation for teaching. So I ended up teaching at FCJ College in Benalla for 4 years. It was a very blessed 4 years, a very happy 4 years, involved in the squash club, the cricket club, the parish, the school, all sorts of different things there. And I loved my time there in the Rose City. It was fantastic. Beautiful friends, a great place to live, and a beautiful part of Victoria. But I suppose while I was teaching there, part of my role in the RE department was to provide reflections and different things like that at certain points during the week and across the term. And I came across this article in a section of America magazine. I don't think it's published anymore, but it was called The Ignatian Educator. And it was written, the topic was about magnanimity. And that really started to pull at my heartstrings, I think, about what's this vocation as a teacher? Is this the deepest, greatest way that I can serve? And so that got me thinking, along with a little collection of essays by Pedro Arrupe that my former parish priest gave me. And in that, Arrupe talked about going out from the Jesuit house in Hiroshima after the bomb had been dropped. And he was walking through all this devastation and destruction. And he recognized a house of a parishioner of his. And so he went in to see if anyone was still there, anything was still possible. And he saw this young woman who'd been affected by the bomb, and she was laying on the table. And the flesh was being eaten away by all the acids and so forth of the bomb. And he went up to her, and she opened her eyes, and she said, "Oh, Father, you've come to bring me communion." And this was quite shocking to Arrupe. He hadn't brought Holy Communion at all. So he went back and got the Blessed Sacrament and came back to her. And when I read that every night for about a month, because I don't know what was going on within me, but there was something there about that story. I think it was the tie to magnanimity from that article, but also that notion of mission, of going to peripheries, of going to frontiers, and that sort of engaged me. And then I suppose that the next big moment in my vocation story was going on a pilgrimage to France, following in the footsteps of the foundress of the school, FCJ College Benalla, that I was teaching at. And everywhere we went, there was these Jesuits, this Jesuit who was her spiritual director, the Jesuit school that she'd sent her son to. And we visited the Jesuit church, Saint Ignace in Paris, all these sorts of things. And there's something going on here. So I suppose I jumped off the cliff and sent an email to the vocations director and into the novitiate with a very open heart and a very open mind to see what these promptings were calling of me.
Isaac, you spoke about having had experience with the FCJs, the Ignatian congregation, and at university you're at a college run by Loreto Sisters, also with an Ignatian charism. You also spent time at Newman College, run by the Jesuits. What was it? You talked also about really strong experiences of parish life and the liturgical life of a parish. What was it about those experiences of being around the Ignatian charism, being around Jesuits, that meant that the Jesuit vocation started to well for you as against maybe one to the diocesan priesthood?
It's a good question. It's a question that I asked myself, I suppose, leading into entering the novitiate. Is this where I'm called to be? And I think for me, the answer to that question is that the Ignatian lens, the examine, the importance of incarnation, the seeking and finding God. For me, it was best found and explained, all that parish life and the richness of sacraments and education was best explained for me in living the Ignatian way, that way of proceeding. The parish was a fantastic place, and I think it really was the ground in which the seed of my life as a Jesuit was planted. But I didn't quite understand that until I suppose encountered the Loretos and the Jesuits at St Mary's and Newman, and then being involved at FCJ College in Benalla and really understanding that Ignatian way of living. So it wasn't that one was better than the other. It was certainly more of an understanding and an opened mind. I suppose like Ignatius at Cardener, I saw things in a different way, in a new way, a better way.
You mentioned, Isaac, that you studied history, and I know you have an ongoing interest in history and the history of the Jesuits in Australia. Is there one particular Jesuit from our past history who has inspired you as you've read something of his history, even if perhaps you haven't never met him, but you've read about him?
Sure. There's a whole myriad of characters that I'd love to meet and talk to. I suppose for me, the one, and I suppose it's connected to Newman in many ways, is Jeremiah Murphy, who was the third rector of Newman College. An amazing man who built the college up, who engaged with the university, who provided this platform from which Newman could be a space in which the church could engage in the tertiary world, and living out that calling that I suppose Ignatius and the first companions found at the University of Paris in so many different ways. And I think he lived a very rich life in terms of engagement with people, both at Newman College, within the college community of the University of Melbourne, but the university itself, being on the university council, etc. So for me, Jeremiah Murphy, as a historical figure that I've never met, who I saw his portrait in the dining room at Newman, would be one person that I'd love to, I suppose, have a conversation with, have a cuppa with.
Isaac, talking about Jeremiah Murphy, you mentioned that sense of engagement and openness, and you talked yourself about when entering the novitiate that you had an open heart to what might come. What is it about that experience of novitiate that helps to confirm or to settle that sense of vocation that obviously you had a real pull towards, but might have been confirmed in those 2 years of Jesuit novitiate?
I think the novitiate, simply speaking, is for me was broken into two parts. It was the spiritual exercises, the long retreat, and then the experiments, or the pastoral placements, for want of a better word. The spiritual exercises at Seven Hill was a grace time for me to use that memory to, I suppose, reflect walking with Jesus in his life through the Gospels and the different exercises that Ignatius has us do, to realise the gifts and the blessings that I've received in my life and the ways in which I've failed to receive them. I've failed to live them as best I can in my humanness. So that was a very rich time in sort of coming to a confirmation, I suppose, that being in this novitiate was really the right thing to do. I suppose it sounds a bit weird to say, well, you're 6 months in and you realised it was the right thing to do. That's the purpose of novitiate in many ways. You think that's what you want to do with your life, like teaching. I wanted to be a teacher, but it wasn't until I stepped into the classroom as a teacher that I realised that that's actually what I wanted to do. And then the experiments. So I love using that word experiment because it is really like a science experiment. You take a Jesuit novice in a certain situation, you put them together and you see what happens. But also not just for the community that's there, but for the Jesuit novice himself. And a beautiful, rich experience of aged care homes, of schools, of the Jesuit work in Timor, of the beautiful work of the church in the Kimberley, for me, really did call on that memory of what I'd experienced growing up in Shepparton, that rich tapestry of parish and community life. And yes, this is where the Lord is calling me to be. This is how I live my baptism. This is who I am.
Isaac, if the young man came to you now with that sort of open heart you had, exploring the possibility of being a Jesuit, what might you say to him?
I remember hearing a homily at World Youth Day in Sydney in 2008, where the line was, "Don't spend your life watching the world go by sitting on the fence." Somebody who's called to an Ignatian way of living, to living this Jesuit vocation, I think is called to engagement, of getting off the fence and having a go. And you don't lose anything by entering the novitiate. You don't lose anything by having a conversation with the vocations director to see if you have this calling to live this way of life. So I would just encourage any young man who thought, I might be called to live this life as a Jesuit, to send an email, jump off the cliff like I did, I suppose. Send an email, have a conversation with a Jesuit, have a conversation with a trusted friend and see what they think. That notion of discernment of spirits that Ignatius talks about. And look at how I'm reacting to things. If I read something in the Gospels, what's my movement there? If I read something of Jesuit history, what's my movement there? If I think about this vocation, living this Jesuit life, what's my movement there? That's what I'd say.